So let's say you're an American, a Canadian, an Australian, a Westerner of any stripe, and you think to yourself, hey, I don't like the direction my country is going. Taxes are going up, the country is going in the wrong direction, and either now or someday in the future, I may not want to be a citizen of my country. I'm going to give you my 3-step plan to replace your top-tier passport with second passports from around the world. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson. I'm the author of this book available on Amazon and the founder of Nomad Capitalist, where we help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you're treated best. More at nomadcapitalist.com. Now, what we've been hearing from a lot of folks in the last year or so, more than ever, is I don't trust my country anymore. I don't like the way things are headed. I believe taxes are not only going up, but they will come up with new taxes. They'll make it more punitive. They will be coming after me as a business owner, an investor, an entrepreneur. And just in general, I don't like where things are going. Now, there's 2 camps, which we've talked about a lot before. There's the plan A, I want out now. I'm going to give them their passport back and I'm going to go to greener pastures. I'm going to get a second citizenship somewhere. I'm going to get a second residence potentially somewhere else. And I'm going to live a life of tax freedom, personal freedom. No one's going to bother me. Other people are building their plan B. I'm not quite ready to leave yet. I want the option to leave. Now, regardless of which one you want, here's the concern that people with what we would call a Tier A citizenship have. There's 3 tiers. Tier A citizens can visit the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. And if you're coming from those countries, you've seen the encroachment on liberties, the rising taxes. You might want to be leaving those countries, but then you think, well, hey, I want to come back to my country in the future. Even if I give up my citizenship, how do I do that? Tier B countries can go to Europe, so if you're European, it's a bit easier to get back in. Tier C have neither access to the big English-speaking countries or Europe, and so those are, with a couple of exceptions like Russia and Turkey, just not great passports unless they are add-ons, unless they're second passports. Now, how do you create a life of total travel freedom? Because even though the pandemic has decimated the passport quality of many of these Western passports. For example, at one point, a US passport was about as good for travel as a Rwanda passport if you counted up the countries. Theoretically, in a post-pandemic world, the US or Canadian passports will go back to their top strength, and you'll say, hey, I can go anywhere I want. That's what you're going to lose if you give up that passport. Now, let me walk you through my 3-step process, and this has been inspired by a couple of conversations I've had with families from both the US and Canada recently about how they would regain their top travel privileges if they were ever to walk away from their current citizenship for all the reasons we've discussed. And so what I'm going to do in this illustration is try and take an affordable but rather certain and streamlined path. We're not going to be relocating all over the world. We're going to let you keep your lifestyle freedom, because especially if you want to stay in your country, that's important. If you're not ready to expatriate yet, that's important. But we're not going to spend money needlessly. Okay? So we're going to take one of the more efficient paths at a reasonable price. And the first thing that we're going to do is our pillar is a Caribbean citizenship by investment. Now, let's just put out for this illustration also, you might have citizenship by descent, you might have citizenship by marriage, you might have some kind of incredible investment that entitles you to citizenship somewhere. Let's just assume none of that applies, which is why obviously you always want to talk through all of your options with someone to make sure you're not just getting a sales pitch for one of the 5 Caribbean countries. But let's assume that none of that other stuff works, and now we can get down to the 5 Caribbean countries. If we look at some of the more expensive programs, especially for singles, they're not that much more expensive, but Antigua and Barbuda, St. Kitts and Nevis, Grenada. Those are going to give you travel privileges either throughout all of Europe, including Russia, or most of Europe. You're going to lose a few of the smaller countries. We'll come back to that in a moment. You're pretty much going to get good coverage in the Caribbean and South America. You're going to get varying levels of coverage in Central America. You're going to get decent coverage in Southeast Asia. Thailand's pretty difficult. Japan is pretty difficult. And you're going to lose a few random countries here and there like Morocco or Paraguay. Those are pretty difficult as well. If South Africa is important to you, then Antigua would be the one that would offer access to that. If China is important to you, if you're trying to build a better passport than your Western passport, if you're trying to add more countries, then Grenada would be important to you. So that's going to be our first pillar. That's something where people expatriate on, or people stepped up to all the time. I had a conversation with someone from the Arab world the other day who had a terrible passport. They were looking to work with us here at Nomad Capitalist as a team member, and their family had gone out and obtained Grenadian citizenship by investment. So now, they're still a citizen of their their birth country, but now they have these much greater travel privileges. Again, if you're an American and you want to step down to one of these Caribbean passports, it's not going to be a big step down. Now, what we're going to add on to beef up some of those smaller countries and beef up your travel freedom, as well as beef up access to embassies and things like that, is Turkey's Citizenship by Investment program. I know this is a little bit daunting for a lot of folks in the West, and so if you don't feel comfortable, you shouldn't do it. It's certainly not for everybody. However, it is an opportunity to invest between $250,000 and I would say $300,000. There are some variables that you want to keep in play that may require you to spend a bit more than the minimum, or that you may want to spend more than the minimum. But from $250,000 to $300,000 in real estate, you get a passport, and the fees are going to be lower than what you pay in the Caribbean. Now, Turkey on its own, if you're planning on leaving your home country, it's going to leave you with a lot of gaps. Turkey, for example, recently met all the criteria that the Schengen area had laid out for it, Europe had laid out in terms of becoming the next Annex II country with visa-free travel to the Schengen area, which Westerners are obviously very familiar with. So that has not happened yet. Right now, Turkish citizens do need a visa if they want to go to France, to Spain, to Norway, to Switzerland. So that is a downside. Of course, you don't have visa-free access to the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, or even the UK and Ireland, which Caribbean citizenships do offer that, UK and Ireland. Turkey does have a certain business visa relationship with the UK, but that's for certain business people. It's not just a tourist visa. What Turkey does offer is you're filling in the gaps in any Central and South American countries. So if places like Paraguay, or for some of the Bitcoiners, El Salvador is important to you if you want to just have maximum travel freedom. Turkey is going to give you an e-visa relationship with Mexico, which none of the Caribbean countries have. Mexico, pretty difficult country to go without a visa. Not a difficult visa to get, but if you just want to be able to show up there, Turkey is one of 3 countries that has a e-visa access. Turkey also adds countries in Southeast Asia, like Thailand, perhaps less interesting, Brunei. It adds Japan. It has a e-visa to Russia, which pretty much all the Caribbean citizenship offer better than that. They offer visa-free travel to Russia. Turkey's going to fill in some of the gaps in Africa, a couple in the Middle East. So these may or may not be countries that you care about. But if we're trying to build the best visa-free travel passport to rival or even beat that of a Tier A US or other Tier A passport, then this is certainly building up the count. It's one that you may be less comfortable traveling on, and you may prefer the Caribbean one, but it certainly does fill in some gaps, including countries that people do like to go to, Morocco being another one. And so that definitely fills in those gaps, as well as if the Caribbean passport does omit some of the Balkan countries outside of the EU, like in Albania, North Macedonia, you would get those back as a Turkish citizen. I can tell you, every time I land in Serbia from Istanbul, they're always checking for the Turkish passports. Who's Turkish? Who's Turkish? So you may come with that, but you do have the access. Now, what I'm going to do on top of that, if we're trying to keep things affordable without changing our lifestyle, because this could be a plan B for someone to be able to step away in the future, what you can do then is you can add some kind of immigration program to Europe, because if we're going to go through the Maltese Citizenship by Investment program, we're going to spend $1 million or more. I recently had a family of 6, and it cost well over $1 million for them to get on the track for Maltese, what they call the exceptional citizenship program. They call it a little bit differently there. And so that's really the one program that's going to give you the access to US and Australia and all those countries. It is a US equivalent or a Canadian or an Australian equivalent passport, with the ability to then travel and live anywhere that you want in the EU, for better or for worse. That's going to cost a lot of money. And so instead of making that donation, you could go the route of a golden visa. Perhaps the most straightforward one that people like is the Portugal golden visa. Now, there are some conditions that you generally want to meet that I don't hear a lot of golden visa salespeople talking about, where they just say, yeah, just spend a week per year here, and they leave it at that. There are some other things that you want to do if you eventually want to be naturalized. However, if you get the Caribbean passport, you get the Turkish passport, you're going to be pretty well covered. There's going to be a couple countries that you have left open. Basically, the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and generally speaking, the UAE. You may have potentially added a couple of countries like Russia and China, and a couple of Middle Eastern countries, but you're still left with those couple of gaps. A European passport would fill in those gaps rather easily. Now, if you want to move to Europe, certainly you could make that where, hey, I have 2 passports. I can expatriate now, or I can expatriate later. I can keep the 2 slightly lower quality passports and work towards Europe through naturalization. You could also, if you have a claim to citizenship by descent, I have people right now who are entitled to Italian, Polish, Hungarian, and other European citizenships, though that's going to take longer. And so if you're looking to expatriate now, you could get those two first passports in a matter of months, certainly less than a year, and then work towards the process, which could take 2, 3, 4 years of obtaining a European passport. But if neither of those things work for you, or if you're not married to an EU citizen or any of that, then you can simply go through the Golden Visa program where you get set up in a country like Portugal. You make your corresponding investment, which is going to be not a donation, but an investment you can recoup. And it's going to be a lower number than what you'd spend in Malta, so it's substantially cheaper. And then you're going to work through the process of spending a certain amount of time in Portugal, for example, every year. And then after 5 years, plus some waiting time at the front, some waiting time at the back, you will be able to obtain, with some language skills, a European citizenship, which is then going to fill in those remaining countries. It's going to fill in the countries like the UAE, and especially, of course, the US, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Now, if you have past issues getting into some of those countries, there is going to be some planning that you want to do. I've had a couple people recently who said, oh yeah, I tried to go to the US before and it didn't work. There's going to be special planning required for you. Or sometimes people say, oh, I expatriated from my country, such as the US, and then I tried to get a visa and it didn't work. Okay, there's going to be special planning for you. So you want to keep in mind not just what the passports offer. I think, again, a lot of people underserve their clients by really not explaining all the tiny little nooks and crannies that do come up and not digging into those things. But by and large, if you do that nook and cranny planning, these 3 passports together, you can get 2 in less than a year. You can get 1 in, let's say, 6.5 years from now through an investment. You're going to have potentially, you're going to have spent some money in the Caribbean on a donation program because the real estate programs in those countries probably not worth taking a look at. The business programs not worth taking a look at. There are no bond programs in those 3 countries in the Caribbean that are available. So you're going to spend some money there. You're going to put a little bit more money in the expense column, plus own a property somewhere in Turkey or have money in the bank in Turkey, $500,000 in the bank. So you've spent some money, you've invested some money, then you're going to invest some money and again spend a little bit more in Europe, potentially Portugal, potentially somewhere you want to live, potentially somewhere you already have a claim to through your family, and you're going to slowly work towards that passport. There's really no fast European passports outside of Malta and in Bulgaria. There are other tax-friendly residence programs if you are looking to move somewhere else, such as Ireland. They have opportunities there. So there's lots of opportunities in Europe is the bottom line, but for the average person who doesn't want to move, Portugal might be a good one. Again, there's others that are worth considering as well. But that's my 3-step plan to where now you've basically filled in all the gaps, plus given yourself some additional visa-free travel. Plus, if you're not from Europe, you've now added the ability to live, work, study, play, pass down citizenship to your children from Europe, something that you might not want to do, passing it on to your children if you're Turkish, something that you're not generally able to do without an additional fee in the Caribbean. So that is the 3-step approach to building the ultimate passport portfolio. For travel, I would argue that there may be other reasons, whether it's financial or geopolitical or business, that you'd want to consider other off-the-wall passports. But from purely saying, I don't feel comfortable leaving my country or even having the option to leave my country until I've rebuilt that passport, until I have the freedom of travel, that's something that you can do. So people ask, Andrew, how do I get the most out of Nomad Capitalist? How do I begin my Nomad Capitalist journey? The first thing people do is they start right where you're at. They watch YouTube, they listen to podcasts, they read articles at nomadcapitalist.com. We've spent years creating thousands of pieces of free content so that you can get the vibe from someone who's actually done this, from someone who's actually been in your shoes. What they'll do next, they'll get a copy of the book. You can find it on Amazon. It costs a few bucks, and while it's not going to give you all the secrets, it's going to, again, give you more of the vibe. You're going to learn a lot of the things that I've learned. You're going to learn some strategies you can employ, and you're going to get a lot further in your journey. From there, if you are the 7 or 8-figure entrepreneur investor, you can go to nomadcapitalist.com. You can click Become a Client. We're pretty busy these days, but we have availability to help a limited number of people who want to create a holistic plan, something that I think is so important. So if you want to do that, go to nomadcapitalist.com, click Become a Client, learn more about how it works and how we can help you.